if we think about where the animals are on the farm and where they end up on the plate, where does Progressive sit in there now
So,
in that sort of value chain?
so we coordinate the supply of lambs from the farm to the plant.
Yep.
And at the plant, basically, we take the outside off, which is the skin and the wool. We take the inside out, which is all the stomach and gut content. And then we prepare the carcass into what we call primal cuts. So it's cut into sections, pieces. So you might see a leg in the butcher shop hang up, or a shoulder,
Yep.
or a rack, a French rack, or a loin area. So those are the names of the cuts, and we'll pack those. And now, pretty well, because of our distance from the market, it's what they call business to business
Yep.
relationship. So we're not selling directly to consumers. We have at least one person between us and the consumer, and often it could be 2 or 3 people depending on the channel to the market. Progressive started its business model as a service provider, so we charge for the service, and our service is defined as the processing for export of beef, lamb, and venison.
Yep.
So that's the coordination of supply. So we receive the live animal and we put the cuts out in cartons from our cold store load on instruction in containers. So I have related interests now, which have evolved over time. So first was in a venison plant in Fielding with a partner there, John Signal, so we're 50-50 in that operation. We built Ovation Fielding in 1995, we built Ovation Gisborne in 1988, 1999. I'd already built a slaughterhouse here in Hastings in 1987, rebuilt it again in 2000. And so with the Advent, we did that in conjunction with Bernard Matthews, and then Bernard Matthews, well, I outlived my usefulness basically, and they didn't see the need for me now that I'd established the plants and had assisted around the quota rules of the time. So I decided it was best if I sold my half share out to them, which we did in 2005. Bernard Matthews had a change of fortunes, and 2 years later they decided to sell it, and with a group of people we bought it all back.
Right.
So in terms of associated facilities, currently, so we have a slaughter plant in a company that I have a majority share of, Ovation, at Fielding, Gisborne and Te Kuiti. We have a fellmongery called Pacific Leathers Limited at Wakatu. We have a pet food operation at Waipakarau, and we have a sheepskin processing facility called Classic Decor in Napier.
Yeah.
And we've got a small joint venture in pharmaceuticals. So Progressive and our associated companies with ownership are all entirely export orientated.
Yep.
So we have very little business in New Zealand. So our New Zealand business would be probably less than 2 to 3% of what we do in total.
Yep.
And with associated companies, we have a facility for retail packing in Fremont, San Francisco. It works under the name of Atkins Ranch.
Yep.
And Lean Meats. It employs about 50 people there. We have an office in Bristol with Ovation in the UK. And those are the 2 external representations. So the retail ready capability in Fremont is the only processing plant that's outside. Oh, and I omitted to say that I do have an interest in a beef abattoir in Cross Hands in Wales. So probably the first reason for having an involvement offshore is around market intelligence.
Yeah.
Because if you're there and you've got reliable people, then you're more likely to be aware of actually what's going on than you're hearing secondhand, particularly if you're hearing it filtered through someone who's got a pecuniary interest in the transfer of product. And it's generally in the trading situation to their advantage to keep you in the dark if they can, because if they know more than you do, that's a negotiating benefit for them.
Yeah.
So by having a presence in, it's some safeguard against that, but it's not a guarantee at all, because it all depends very much on the people. The technical reason for the retail facility in Fremont is it's very difficult. We can't maintain the colour. So as soon as you cut a chop or a steak from that time with sunlight and temperature, so it's both temperature and sunlight dependent, it starts to degrade. The colour goes from nice bright red from the oxymyoglobin, and then it goes away to a dull brown, which is the myoglobin, and that takes a period of time, and the rate at which that happens is dependent, as I said, on temperature and sunlight. We can't hold the colour from this distance, so it's too far. If we're 3-5 weeks to 6 weeks away in that form, it's going to be brown. Yep. By the time it gets there, and doesn't look good, and consumers buy with their eyes. Certainly at retail, at food service you might, but you need an educated consumer with regard to the understanding that the fact that it's brown doesn't mean it's any less satisfying to eat.
Who are your main competitors within New Zealand or worldwide?
So on a worldwide basis, then primarily our competitor is other protein options for the centre of the plate.
So it's not other
Generally,
processes.
generally not. It's a big wide world there, and we produce enough food generally, depending on who you talk to. Some say we can feed 20 million people, others say we can feed 40 million people. But whichever way you look at it, we know there's 300 to 350 million people in the US on their own, and China's 1 point something billion. So whatever we do, we're only a tiny rank. So we don't tend to stumble across too often these days, maybe apart from the UK supermarkets where some New Zealand companies there where they get played off one against the other. But in other parts of the world, we seem to be able to coexist. So an unusual aspect of our business and our industry is that we compete to buy and sell. So this is an important consideration and understanding the behaviours of the people. So it's unusual. Normally suppliers compete to supply you raw materials, and you have an assembly process and you put things together. I use a washing machine for example. You draw parts from a multitude of suppliers, you put it together, you sell a washing machine. We actually receive a natural product which is complete and whole, and we take it apart. So our business starts off with being relatively simple and gradually gets more complex when it goes out. So we don't take complexity into a simplicity, we take simplicity into a complexity. So that aspect then, competing to buy, means that our behaviours are significantly driven by what our competitors are doing in the procurement market. And so in our particular area here, so we would come across in a competitive sense all of the major meat companies pretty well. So the top four are so Silverfern Farms would be the largest nationally, and then Alliance, and then we've got ANZCO and AFCO, and our Ovation grouping is a distant fifth from that.
Yeah. Okay.
In terms of ownership, so Silverfern Farms is a cooperative but half owned by Chinese interests. Alliance is a full cooperative, all owned by farmers, as I understand, mainly in the South Island, but not only, there's some in the North Island now. ANZCO has a major Japanese shareholding in it. I can't recall the exact percentage, and some New Zealand shareholdings. And AFCO is owned by the Tully family. And the Ovation Group is a majority ownership by myself and my wife and some other people, and including the staff.